Hello, welcome to the Kansas Wildlife Exhibit. I'm the exhibit caretaker, Todd Volkmann, and I'm going to give you a tour of this facility today. This is Chuck. He's been here well over 20 years. Just like a lot of the animals here, they have pretty good lives in captivity. Now, Chuck does go out on programs. He's visited thousands of school children. He's also been to multiple events. He is one of the animal ambassadors here. And if you look up in the tree, you will see some hawks. Now, some of the animals here have noticeable injuries. They all have a sad story attached to them one way or another. Some of them are injured. Some of them have been raised in captivity, but they've all been unable to be released in the wild, and that's why they're here. A benefit is that they can be used for education programs, and they can have a pretty long life here. This is Tallulah, the great horned owl. She does get the occasional wild visitor. If you come to the park at night, you can often hear great horned owls calling to each other, herself included. Now, she can sometimes be hard to spot, especially when everything starts to leaf out, but she's up there somewhere. Now below, a challenge is to try and find some turtles. Now, some of the aquatic ones will be basking. There might be some three-toed box turtles crawling around the exhibit. You have one right here by the pond, another one waiting patiently by the entrance to the display, and there's probably still some hiding underneath those rocks. So possums are a pretty unique animal. Now, usually if you think of an animal with a pouch, first thing that comes to mind is a kangaroo or a koala, but this is the only marsupial in all of North America. Now, there's a few misconceptions about possums. Some good things is that they're not known for having rabies, and they also eat a lot of destructive critters like snails, slugs, and especially ticks. Her diet is pretty varied. That's one of the reasons possums do so well, despite what you see on the roadside. They're very successful around people. We provide shelter, we provide food, even if we're not trying to. They will definitely eat cat food and dog food that's left outside. They might make their way into your trash occasionally. Really, they just love being around people. They'll live under decks, they'll live under sheds, they use fences like highways, and it's kind of a fun animal to come across. They are very nocturnal. The only reason she's out right now is because of that food dish in front of her face. Now, one sad thing about possums is that even with ideal care and being protected in a situation like this, their lifespan is only about 2 or 3 years. Most of the possums that end up here have the same sad story. This one and also the one at the Great Plains Nature Center, they were with their mom when she was hit by a car, unfortunately. So mom didn't make it, but the possum was hand-raised and ended up in an education setting. Now, this is a popular program animal. He's been going out for about 12 years. I've been calling him Rusty. This is a red-shouldered hawk. This is not a very common hawk in the area. It's usually a woodland hawk. They're a little smaller than the red tails and the ferruginous one in the hawk aviary. Now, if you look at him, you might notice something's a little odd about his beak and his left eye. His backstory, it's kind of a legendary story, was that as a fledgling, he was attacked by turkeys and they kind of beat him up. He's an example of an animal that was injured by another animal, and that's how he ended up in this situation. He wouldn't survive in the wild. He is here as an animal ambassador. This is the middle of the night for Choppa the beaver. Now, Choppa's been here about 8 years. He was found in Chisholm Creek Park right before an event started there. And he was raised from a very young age, so he's definitely used to being at the exhibit. Choppa's quite famous because he did escape once and ended up in the Ark River for 4 full days. Now, we knew where he was after the first day. Connie, the caretaker that was here for decades, kept an eye on him that whole time. And on the 5th morning, a regular walking through the park witnessed Choppa trying to dig his way back into his own exhibit. It kind of goes to show that even if given the opportunity of being out in the wild, they might not want to be there. Choppa has definitely been used to being here his whole life and wanted to come back and probably eat sweet potatoes and have food handed to him. He does have some enrichment in his display. He definitely behaves like a beaver. He makes his own bed. He chops through limbs in his display, and he trashes it every night. And our first job in the morning is to clean up his mess. So the best time to see Choppa the beaver is typically an hour before sunset or sometime at night. Now, if you show up, especially in the morning or during the afternoon, chances are he's not going to be out unless you catch him having his lunch, which we leave on the rock for him. There are other animals that also hide during the day. We don't force them to be out and exposed. The bobcat, especially after having lunch, typically takes a long nap afterward and doesn't come around again until in the evening sometime. The possums are known for being creatures of the night as well, except when they have lunch. She's also wandering around in the evening and during the night. And this is probably our most popular animal and our newest animal ambassador, Rufus the bobcat. So Rufus gets various enrichment throughout the day, including part of his food being placed in a box where it can take him anywhere from a few seconds to well over 10 minutes to get it out. Now his favorite food is in there at the moment. That would be a chicken leg. We'll also hide his food around the rocks of his display and leave some in his dish that he'll usually have later. Now in the wild, their diet consists of anything from large insects to even possibly a white-tailed deer. We do offer other enrichment such as mice, rats, occasionally small birds. I did give him a squirrel a couple weeks ago that he enjoyed. Now being in a park setting, this park squirrels do tease him quite a bit. They'll hang out on the trees, shake their tails. They know that he can't get to him. There are some pretty brave birds that will also land pretty close. His next door neighbors are ducks that he'd also like to get it if he could. He does practice stalking on the beaver when it has lunch. Now Rufus is about 11 months old. His backstory is he was found in a rural setting. He kind of mixed in with some domestic cats. He was a very small kitten at the time, but at an early age he got used to being around people. Now bobcats are a very shy and elusive animal. They're very successful because they tend to stay away from people and they haven't really adapted like a lot of other animals have. But because he was rather tame, he ended up at Milford Nature Center before coming here, and he's going to stay here. A lot of people were familiar with the bobcat that was here for about 20 years that passed away last year. That one was found in South Wichita, so they might be a little closer than you think. They're just usually out of sight, out of mind. So this is our most occupied aviary. It's usually referred to as the duck aviary. There are 7 ducks in here currently. All of them are male. In addition, we have Frank the Franklin's gull. Now he provides the soundtrack to this place. He's quite vocal. You can really hear him from anywhere in the park, calling out on a regular basis. Now in the background you might notice some tall gangly birds. Those are both night herons. We have a black-crowned night heron and a yellow-crowned night heron. And they're currently building a nest at the base of that branch right there. The black-crowned is trying to find a twig to add to it at the moment. On the ground, we do have some basking red-eared slider turtles and also a map turtle. And somewhere there's a painted turtle, but he is not sunning himself right now. A bird that people often ask about is the one that's always flying around this exhibit, and that is a female American kestrel. These are a very common bird. Now, just from the size, you may think it's something else, but it's actually a really small falcon. They can eat other small birds, rodents, and they will also eat insects. Now, this is a hatchling 3-toed box turtle. Occasionally, life happens at the Kansas Wildlife Exhibit. We do have quite a few 3-toed box turtles, and this hatchling just came out of the ground about a week ago. He was small enough that it could crawl right through the wire. The Kansas Wildlife Exhibit is located in Central Riverside Park. It is walking distance from the Keeper of the Plains. Now in the park itself, there's also a splash pad that is quite popular during the warmer months of the year. There's also a playground and just many areas to walk around downtown Wichita, including along the river and through the parks themselves. Other nearby attractions include the Mid-America All-Indian Center, Botanica, Cowtown, the Wichita Art Museum, and Sims Golf Course. The building behind me has been here since 1988, and that's how long the Kansas Wildlife Exhibit has been here. But the history of animals in this park has been a lot longer. Since 1901, something has been on display in Central Riverside Park. It all started with a white-tailed deer. You may not think that that was much of a draw, but at the time people hadn't seen them for decades and people flocked just to see a white-tailed deer. And from there, they kept adding animals. A lot of people will talk about the alligator pit, which went away in the early 70s. But those alligators spent over 60 years in this park. It also included a lion display, a monkey house, and something called Bear Mountain. So there's a lot of history here, but for right now, it is the Kansas Wildlife Exhibit. So all the animals here are native to Kansas, at least at some point during the year. And they all come from rehab situations. And they wouldn't survive in the wild or they're been deemed not to be released. And some of them are even used for educational programs through the Great Plains Nature Center or through the city of Wichita. If you would like to schedule use of one of these animals in a program, that can be done through the Great Plains Nature Center. The wildlife exhibit is a collaboration between the Great Plains Nature Center and the city of Wichita. As we mentioned a few times, a lot of these animals are used for educational programs and events. Thank you for taking this virtual tour of the Kansas Wildlife Exhibit. We invite you to please visit this free attraction as many times as you can. It is open 24/7. That does not necessarily mean the animals are always on display during that time, but if you follow us on our Facebook page at Kansas Wildlife Exhibit, you can also see that we'll have scheduled feeding and program times where even if you do come during the day, you might catch a glimpse of Choppa the beaver and some of the more nocturnal animals.